sirens flashed against the pristine storefronts of Oak Creek, reflecting a gross abuse of power that happens all too often. Handcuffs clicked shut around the wrists of a woman whose only crime was existing in the wrong zip code while grabbing a morning coffee. Sheriff Quentin Harlan smiled, convinced he had just put another troublemaker in her place for a minor infraction. He had no idea the wrists he just bound belonged to one of the most ruthless constitutional law professors in the country. By the time he realized his mistake, his career, his badge, and his entire corrupt department would be reduced to ash. Dr. Serena Langford adjusted the lapels of her tailored charcoal blazer as she stepped out of Carver's Confections. The crisp autumn air of Oak Creek carried the scent of fallen leaves and expensive artisan espresso. At 42, Serena had built a life defined by precision, intellect, and an unyielding grasp of the law. As a tenured professor of constitutional law at the prestigious Ellsworth University and a former federal prosecutor, she was accustomed to commanding courtrooms, lecture halls, and boardrooms. She was not accustomed to the sight that currently awaited her on the manicured cobblestone street. Parked alongside the curb was her silver Volvo XC90. Standing directly behind it, aggressively writing on a citation pad, was a uniformed officer. The man was broad-shouldered with a ruddy complexion and mirrored aviator sunglasses that caught the morning sun. His badge read, Q. Harlan, Sheriff. Serena sighed, her breath pluming in the cool air. She held a delicate white bakery box containing a retirement cake for federal judge Warren Langford, a mentor and close friend. Carefully balancing the box, she approached her vehicle. "Excuse me, officer," Serena said, her voice calm and modulated, projecting the same authoritative neutrality she used to silence rowdy first-year law students. "Is there a problem?" Sheriff Quentin Harlan paused, his pen hovering over the thick pad of paper. He turned slowly, looking Serena up and down. Oak Creek was an insular, hyper-wealthy enclave just outside the city limits. It was a town of country clubs, gated driveways, and a notoriously aggressive local police force that essentially operated as a private security firm for the ultra-rich residents. Serena, a black woman in a business suit driving a luxury car, was an anomaly in Harlan's daily patrol, and his body language immediately shifted into a posture of practiced intimidation. "The problem?" Harlan drawled, taking a deliberate step toward her. "Is that you don't know how to park? You're blocking a fire hydrant." Serena blinked, her gaze shifting to the sidewalk. There was indeed a fire hydrant, painted a bright, fresh yellow. However, her rear bumper was well clear of it. She possessed an eidetic memory for spatial relations, a quirk that made her formidable in analyzing crime scene photos. "I apologize if it appears close from your angle, Sheriff," Serena replied smoothly, keeping her tone even, "but I am parked legally. The state vehicle code, specifically section 22,514, mandates a distance of 15 feet, a fire hydrant. I have parked at least 18 feet away. You can measure the paving stones yourself. They are standard 18-inch squares, and there are exactly 12 of them between my bumper and the hydrant base." Harlan's jaw tightened. The smug satisfaction of writing an easy ticket vanished, replaced by a flash of irritated ego. Officers like Quentin Harlan did not appreciate being corrected. They especially did not appreciate being quoted state vehicle codes by citizens they had already deemed subordinate. "Listen here," Harlan said, his voice dropping an octave, stepping directly into Serena's personal space. I don't need a math lesson, and I don't care about your paving stones. In Oak Creek, the town ordinance is 20 feet. You are in violation. Hand over your driver's license, registration, and proof of insurance. Serena did not flinch. She knew the law intimately. She also knew that local ordinances could not supersede state vehicle codes regarding standard parking distances unless explicitly posted with visible signage. There were no signs. "Sheriff Harlan," Serena said, her voice dropping to a cooler, firmer register. "I was not operating the vehicle when you approached. The vehicle is parked and turned off. As such, you are writing a civil parking citation which attaches to the vehicle's registration, not the driver. I am not legally required to provide you with my physical identification for a parking ticket." A vein pulsed prominently on the side of Harlan's neck. He pointed a thick, calloused finger at her face. "You are refusing a lawful order from a law enforcement officer. Give me your ID right now, or I'll pull you in for obstruction." The street, previously quiet, began to attract onlookers. A few patrons inside the bakery peered through the glass windows. A woman walking a golden retriever stopped on the corner, watching the exchange with wide eyes. Serena remained motionless. She knew the trap. If she argued aggressively, she would be labeled belligerent. If she complied with an unlawful order, she surrendered her civil liberties to a man drunk on a tiny modicum of power. "I am perfectly willing to accept the parking citation," Serena stated clearly, ensuring her voice carried enough for the bystanders to hear. "Place it on the windshield. But I will not surrender my identification without reasonable, articulable suspicion that I have committed a crime. A parking violation is a civil infraction." "That's it," Harlan barked. He shoved his citation pad into his chest pocket and reached for his belt. "Turn around. Put your hands behind your back." For a fraction of a second, genuine shock pierced Serena's practiced composure. He is actually going to do this, she thought, over an imaginary parking violation. "Sheriff," Serena warned, her tone sharpening into a blade, "I strongly advise you to think about the civil rights violation you are about to commit. This is an unlawful arrest." "I said turn around," Harlan roared, grabbing Serena's shoulder and forcefully spinning her. The bakery box tumbled from her hands. The pristine white cardboard hit the pavement, bursting open. Judge Langford's meticulously crafted vanilla buttercream retirement cake splattered across the cobblestones. A tragic casualty of bruised ego. Cold steel bit into Serena's wrists as Harlan ratcheted the handcuffs tightly, far tighter than standard procedure dictated. The sharp pinch sent a jolt of pain up her forearms, but she bit the inside of her cheek, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a wince. "You have the right to remain silent," Harlan sneered directly into her ear, his breath smelling faintly of stale tobacco and peppermint. "I suggest you start using it." "You are making a monumental mistake, Sheriff," Serena said softly, staring straight ahead at the brick facade of the bakery. "I hear that every day," Harlan scoffed. He grabbed her by the bicep, marching her aggressively toward the back of his cruiser. He practically shoved her into the back seat, slamming the heavy door shut behind her. Inside the cruiser, the air was stiflingly hot. The thick plexiglass partition separated her from Harlan, who climbed into the driver's seat with a look of immense self-satisfaction. He picked up his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4. I've got a 1015 female refusing to identify, obstruction of justice, disturbing the peace. Bringing her into the station." Serena sat in the cramped, hard plastic seat, her shoulders aching from the unnatural angle of her restrained arms. She took a slow, deep breath, visualizing the chaotic emotions as a physical entity and pushing them into a locked box in her mind. Panic was useless. Anger, however, was a tool, and Dr. Serena Langford was about to sharpen that tool into a weapon that Oak Creek would never forget. The ride to the Oak Creek Sheriff's Department was short, but Harlan ensured it was as unpleasant as possible. He took corners sharply, causing Serena to slide against the hard plastic seating, her bound wrists taking the brunt of her weight to keep her upright. He intentionally hit a prominent pothole on Elmwood Avenue, grinning in the rear-view mirror when the jolt threw her against the heavy metal grating of the partition. "You know," Harlan's voice crackled through the speaker system separating the front and back cabs, "people come into my town thinking they can do whatever they want, thinking the rules don't apply to them. A nice car and a fancy suit don't mean a damn thing to me. Respect, that's what matters. And you're going to learn some today." Serena said nothing. She simply watched him through the mirror, her dark eyes locking onto his reflection. Her silence seemed to unnerve him more than a screaming fit would have. He turned up the volume on his radio, blasting classic rock to fill the quiet, uncomfortable tension that had settled in the vehicle. Mentally, Serena was already working. She was drafting the federal lawsuit in her head. Title 42, Section 1983 of the United States Code. Deprivation of rights under color of law. False arrest, false imprisonment, battery, intentional infliction of emotional distress. She was meticulously cataloging every procedural error Harlan was making. He had claimed obstruction and disturbing the peace over the radio, yet he had initiated the disturbance. He had handcuffed her excessively tight, a potential use of force violation. He was actively punishing her with his driving. The cruiser pulled into the gated rear lot of a squat, brutalist concrete building that served as the Oak Creek Municipal Center and Sheriff's Precinct. Harlan dragged her out of the car by the cuffs, lifting her arms just high enough to cause a sharp, burning pain in her rotator cuffs. "Keep moving," he grunted, ushering her through the heavy metal back doors. The interior of the precinct smelled of stale coffee, industrial floor wax, and bureaucratic apathy. The booking room was harshly lit with fluorescent tubes that buzzed with an irritating frequency. Behind an elevated desk sat dispatcher Loretta Vance, a woman with heavily lacquered hair, who didn't bother looking up from her crossword puzzle as they entered. Standing near the fingerprinting station was Deputy Bryce Nolan. He was young, perhaps in his mid-20s, with an ill-fitting uniform and a nervous energy about him. He looked up, his eyes widening slightly as he took in the sight of Serena. Unlike the usual weekend drunk drivers or local teenagers caught vandalizing mailboxes, Serena looked like she had just stepped out of a corporate boardroom. Despite the handcuffs, her posture was flawlessly straight, her chin held high, her expression one of terrifying calm. "Got a live one, boss?" Deputy Nolan asked, his voice lacking conviction. "Obstruction. Refusal to ID caused a scene downtown?" Harlan declared loudly, tossing Serena's purse onto the intake counter. He unlocked her cuffs, roughly shoving her toward a metal bench bolted to the wall. "Sit." Serena rubbed her bruised wrists. Deep, angry red indents ringed her skin, already beginning to swell. She looked directly at Deputy Nolan. Deputy, I require medical documentation of these abrasions. Your sheriff applied the restraints with punitive force. I want photographs taken immediately before the swelling subsides. Nolan shifted uncomfortably, looking from Serena to his boss. Sheriff. Ignore her, Bryce, Harlan snapped. He dumped the contents of Serena's expensive leather purse onto the metal counter. Lipstick, a compact, a set of keys, a Mont Blanc fountain pen, and finally a sleek leather wallet. Harlan snatched the wallet, flipping it open with a triumphant smirk. He pulled out her driver's license. Let's see who we have here, Harlan muttered. He read the card. Serena Langford, address in the city. Well, Serena, you're about to have a very long day. Sheriff Harlan, Serena said, her voice echoing slightly in the sterile room. You have seized my personal property without a warrant or a valid inventory search protocol, as my arrest is fundamentally unlawful. You are compounding your liabilities with every passing minute. Processor, Harlan ordered Nolan, turning his back on Serena. Fingerprints, mugshot, the whole 9 yards. Put her in holding cell 2. Deputy Nolan approached Serena tentatively. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to stand up for the photograph. Serena stood gracefully. She complied perfectly with Nolan's instructions, standing against the height chart. When the flash went off, she didn't look angry or frightened. She looked directly into the lens with an icy, penetrating stare. It was the face of a predator watching its prey wander blindly into a trap. As Nolan led her to the ink pad for fingerprinting, Serena spoke softly, exclusively to him. Deputy Nolan, is it? Yes, ma'am, he mumbled, refusing to meet her eyes. You are a young man. You have a long career ahead of you, Serena murmured, pressing her thumb onto the paper as he guided her hand. Do not allow your commanding officer's hubris to destroy your future. Document everything you are seeing right now. You have a duty to intervene when you witness constitutional violations. Nolan swallowed hard, wiping the ink from her fingers with a coarse paper towel. He looked nervously toward Harlan's office, where the sheriff was loudly boasting on a phone call. I'm just doing my job, ma'am. I know, Serena replied gently. But just doing my job has never been a valid legal defense in a federal civil rights tribunal. The color drained slightly from Nolan's face. He finished processing her in silence and led her down a short, dimly lit, cinder block hallway. He unlocked the heavy iron door of cell 2. It was bare, featuring a stainless steel toilet and a concrete bench. I am entitled to my phone call, Serena stated before stepping inside. Immediately. Nolan hesitated, then nodded. There's a payphone at the end of the hall, 2 minutes. He escorted her to a battered metal telephone bolted to the wall. Serena didn't need to look up a number. She dialed an out-of-state area code from memory. It rang twice. Pennington. A deep, gravelly voice answered. Marcus, it's Serena, she said, her voice steady. Marcus Pennington was not a husband, a brother, or a bail bondsman. He was the senior managing partner at Pennington and Voss, one of the most ruthless and devastatingly effective civil rights litigation firms on the East Coast. He was also Serena's co-author on a seminal legal textbook regarding municipal liability and police misconduct. The tone on the other end shifted instantly from casual to razor sharp. Serena, where are you? Oak Creek Municipal Holding. I was just arrested, ostensibly for a parking violation, escalated to obstruction and failure to identify. A low, dark chuckle rumbled through the phone. They arrested you, Serena Langford, over a parking ticket. The arresting officer is Sheriff Quentin Harlan. He applied punitive restraints, denied my request to identify a lawful basis for the stop, and executed a retaliatory arrest when I quoted the state vehicle code. Good God, the man has a death wish, Marcus muttered. I can hear him typing furiously on a keyboard. Are you injured? Minor abrasions to the wrists. I've already demanded documentation, which was denied. Marcus, I want the full battery. Draft the federal injunction. Title 42, Section 1983. Contact the State Attorney General's office regarding a pattern and practice investigation of the Oak Creek Department. And Marcus, call Dean Montgomery. Tell him I might be slightly late for the faculty board meeting tomorrow and tell him to warm up the university's legal clinic. I want 50 law students combing through every single arrest Sheriff Harlan has made in the last 10 years by sunrise. Consider it done. Sit tight, Serena. I'm sending a local associate to bail you out within the hour. Then we drop the hammer. Serena hung up the phone. She turned back to Deputy Nolan, who was staring at her with wide, terrified eyes, having heard enough of the legal terminology to realize they had just stepped on a landmine. Cell 2, wasn't it? Serena asked politely. She walked herself into the cell, turned around, and waited for Nolan to slide the heavy iron bars shut. The metallic clang echoed through the corridor, signaling the point of no return. Quentin Harlan thought he had locked up a problem. He didn't realize he had just locked himself in a cage with a tiger. Inside the stale, fluorescent-lit confines of the Oak Creek Sheriff's Department, Quentin Harlan was riding the high of a perceived victory. He leaned against the dispatch counter, a steaming mug of black coffee in his hand, regaling dispatcher Loretta Vance with an exaggerated retelling of the morning's events. You should have seen her, Loretta. Harlan chuckled. His chest puffed out beneath his khaki uniform, spouting off about state vehicle codes and paving stones, like she owned the damn town. These city types, they think a fancy vocabulary makes them immune to the law. I put a stop to that real quick. She's in cell 2, quiet as a mouse now. They always quiet down once the steel door shuts. Loretta offered a non-committal grunt, her eyes still glued to a crossword puzzle. Just make sure the paperwork is clean, Quentin. The mayor is already breathing down our necks about the department budget. We don't need City Hall complaining about a frivolous arrest. It's not frivolous, it's obstruction, Harlan fired back, his ego immediately flaring at the slight challenge. She refused a lawful order. Across the room, Deputy Bryce Nolan was not laughing. He was sitting at his small metal desk, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The brief, chilling conversation he had with the woman in cell 2 was playing on a loop in his mind. Just doing my job has never been a valid legal defense in a federal civil rights tribunal. Nolan swallowed dryly. He pulled his smartphone from his pocket, shielding the screen from Harlan's line of sight. With trembling thumbs, he opened a search engine and typed in the name from the driver's license, Serena Langford. The results populated in less than a second, and the color rapidly drained from Deputy Nolan's face. The first result was a faculty page for Ellsworth University Law School. There, staring back at him in a crisp, high-definition headshot, was the exact woman currently sitting in their holding cell. Nolan tapped the link, his eyes scanning the biography with mounting horror. Doctor. Serena Langford, Juris Doctor, Harvard Law School, magna cum laude, former Assistant United States Attorney, Civil Rights Division, current Chair of Constitutional Law, lead appellate counsel in Davis versus City of New York, resulting in a landmark $42 million settlement for municipal police misconduct. Nolan felt a cold sweat break out across his forehead. His eyes darted down to her publications. She was the co-author of a textbook titled Municipal Liability and the Color of Law, navigating Section 1983. Nolan recognized that title. He recognized it because it was the exact textbook he had been forced to study during his final week at the State Police Academy. The definitive authoritative text on how police officers get sued, lose their badges, and bankrupt their departments. "A sheriff," Nolan squeaked, his voice cracking slightly. Harlan turned, an annoyed scowl twisting his features. "What is it, Bryce?" "Spit it out." "Sheriff, I looked her up," Nolan stammered, standing up and holding his phone out like a live grenade. "The woman in cell 2, Serena Langford. You need to see this." Harlan rolled his eyes, taking a slow sip of his coffee. "I don't care if she's the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, Bryce. The law is the law." "She's not a CEO, boss," Nolan whispered urgently, stepping closer. "She's a law professor, a constitutional law professor. She used to be a federal prosecutor for the Civil Rights Division. Sheriff, she literally wrote the book on suing police departments for false arrest." Harlan froze. The mug stopped halfway to his lips. For a fraction of a second, doubt flickered in his arrogant eyes, but Quentin Harlan was a man fundamentally incapable of admitting a mistake. His defense mechanism was to double down. "Internet garbage," Harlan scoffed, waving a dismissive hand, though his voice lacked its previous booming confidence. "Anyone can make a fancy website. She was blocking a hydrant and refused to ID. It's a clean collar. Stop shaking like a leaf, deputy, and go process her property." Before Nolan could protest further, the heavy glass doors of the precinct lobby swung open with violent force. The man who walked in did not belong in Oak Creek. He was impeccably dressed in a bespoke navy blue suit, a crisp white shirt, and a silk tie. He carried a pristine leather briefcase and moved with the predatory grace of a shark smelling blood in the water. He bypassed the empty waiting area chairs and walked directly to the reinforced glass partition separating the lobby from the bullpen. "I am here for Dr. Serena Langford," the man announced. His voice was not loud, but it possessed a resonant, commanding authority that demanded absolute silence. Harlan set his coffee down, his jaw tight. He walked over to the glass, crossing his arms. "And who the hell are you?" "My name is Garrett Cole. I am a senior associate with Pennington and Voss," the man replied, slipping a glossy business card through the small metal slot under the glass. "I am acting as Dr. Langford's legal counsel." "Well, Mr. Cole," Harlan drawled, leaning close to the glass, "your client is currently being processed for obstruction of justice. She'll be eligible for bail following her arraignment tomorrow morning. You can come back then." Garrett Cole did not blink. He unlatched his briefcase, pulling out a thick sheath of legal documents stamped with the seal of the federal district court. "There will be no arraignment tomorrow, Sheriff Harlan," Cole said smoothly, sliding the documents through the slot. "What you are holding is a writ of habeas corpus signed exactly minutes ago by federal Judge Warren Langford, who, as it happens, is quite displeased that his retirement cake was destroyed this morning. Furthermore, I have a bond posted in full and an emergency injunctive order demanding Dr. Langford's immediate release. Harlan stared at the paperwork. The signature of a federal judge was not something a local sheriff could ignore. A deep, sinking feeling began to take root in his stomach. "Release her now," Cole commanded, his eyes locking onto Harlan's. "Or I will have the United States Marshal Service down here in minutes to arrest you for contempt of a federal court order." The silence in the precinct was deafening. Dispatcher Loretta had finally stopped her crossword puzzle, her pen suspended in midair. Deputy Nolan looked like he was going to be sick. Harlan's face flushed a deep, mottled purple. He snatched the paperwork from the slot, his eyes scanning the federal seal and the undeniable scrolled signature of Judge Langford. He was cornered, and he knew it. "Nolan!" Harlan barked, his voice tight with suppressed rage. "Go get her!" Nolan practically sprinted down the cinder-block hallway. A minute later he returned, walking a few paces behind Serena. She looked exactly as she had when she was forced into the back of the cruiser. Her charcoal blazer was slightly wrinkled, and her wrists still bore the angry red marks of the handcuffs. But her posture remained flawless. She did not look relieved. She looked resolute. Garrett Cole stepped back as Harlan reluctantly unlocked the heavy security door leading to the lobby. Serena stepped through, her heels clicking sharply against the linoleum floor. She approached the intake counter where her purse and belongings sat. "Are you all right, Dr. Langford?" Cole asked, his tone shifting to deep respect. "I am perfectly fine, Garrett. Thank you for your promptness," Serena replied, calmly placing her wallet and keys back into her purse. Harlan stood by the door, his fists clenched at his sides. "Don't think this is over. You're still facing charges." Serena paused. She turned slowly, her dark eyes pinning Harlan in place. The absolute absence of fear in her gaze was deeply unsettling. "Oh, Sheriff Harlan," Serena said softly, "it is just beginning." Cole stepped forward, pulling a thick manila envelope from his briefcase and pressing it directly into Harlan's chest. "Sheriff, consider this formal service. This is a spoliation of evidence notice. It demands the immediate, unaltered preservation of all dash cam footage, body cam footage, holding cell surveillance, dispatch audio, and radio telemetry from the moment you initiated the stop." Cole leaned in slightly, dropping his voice to a lethal whisper. "If a single frame of video is deleted, if a single second of audio goes missing, if the server miraculously crashes tonight, Pennington and Voss will personally petition the Department of Justice to bring federal evidence tampering and obstruction charges against you and every deputy in this building. Do you understand?" Harlan swallowed hard, the manila envelope feeling like a lead weight in his hands. He couldn't speak. He just stared at the two lawyers. "Furthermore," Serena added, her voice echoing in the quiet room, "I will be filing a formal complaint with the State Attorney General before close of business today, requesting a full pattern and practice investigation into the Oak Creek Sheriff's Department. Your history of racially motivated stops, which I am certain your records will reflect, is about to become public knowledge." She picked up her purse and adjusted her blazer. "Sheriff," Serena concluded, her tone devoid of malice, delivering a pure clinical fact, "I highly suggest you retain independent specialized counsel. The Oak Creek City Attorney is not equipped to handle the magnitude of the federal civil rights lawsuit that will be filed against you in your personal and professional capacity by Friday morning. Have a pleasant afternoon." Serena and Cole turned and walked out of the precinct, the heavy glass doors swinging shut behind them, leaving a suffocating silence in their wake. Harlan stood frozen, the bravado completely drained from his body. He slowly turned his head to look at Deputy Nolan. Nolan had rotated his computer monitor so it faced the lobby. On the screen was the Ellsworth University faculty page. Huge, bold letters displayed Serena's credentials, her history as a federal prosecutor, and the cover of her textbook on police misconduct. Sheriff Quentin Harlan stared at the screen, the reality of his colossal mistake crashing down upon him. He hadn't just arrested a citizen. He had arrested the apex predator of the legal world, and he had handed her the weapon to destroy him on a silver platter. The true nightmare for Oak Creek wasn't the arrest. It was what Dr. Serena Langford was going to do next. Soon after her arrest, Dr. Serena Langford did not cancel her classes. Instead, she walked into the Ellsworth University Law School's amphitheater exactly on time, dressed in a sharp navy suit, her wrists concealed beneath silk cuffs. The murmur of the 100-person lecture hall died down instantly. Rumors had already spread like wildfire through the campus group chats. Serena set her briefcase on the podium and looked out at the sea of aspiring attorneys. "Open your casebooks to page 412, Serena instructed, her voice steady and clear. "Today we are skipping ahead to Monell versus Department of Social Services. We are going to discuss how a municipality can be held liable for the unconstitutional actions of its employees when those actions reflect a pervasive custom or policy." She paused, her eyes glinting. "And for this semester's clinical practicum, we will not be using hypothetical scenarios. We will be using the Oak Creek Sheriff's Department." The lecture hall erupted in a stunned, electrified silence. By noon, the Ellsworth Civil Rights Clinic had been transformed into a legal war room. 50 top-tier law students, fueled by espresso and righteous indignation, were mobilized under Serena's direct supervision. She partnered her clinic with Marcus Pennington's litigation team, creating a terrifyingly efficient machine designed for one purpose: the absolute legal dismantling of Sheriff Quentin Harlan and his department. The students began meticulously scraping through the public access to court electronic records, PACER system, and filing dozens of Freedom of Information Act requests. They requested arrest logs, traffic citation demographics, use of force reports, and civil asset forfeiture ledgers spanning the last decade. Mayor Clayton Reeves of Oak Creek attempted to stonewall the requests, citing administrative burdens. It was a fatal error. Marcus Pennington immediately filed an emergency writ of mandamus in federal court. Judge Warren Langford, still bitter over his ruined retirement cake and appalled by the department's hubris, signed the order compelling the town to release the documents or face daily compounding fines. When the data finally poured in, the clinical students found something far more sinister than a single racist sheriff with a bruised ego. "Dr. Langford, you need to see this," said Morgan Ellis, a brilliant third-year law student, pointing at a sprawling spreadsheet projected onto the war room wall. Serena stepped up, crossing her arms. "Walk me through it, Morgan." "It's not just racial profiling," Morgan explained, her voice trembling slightly with disgust. "It's a localized, illegal taxation system. Look at the demographic heat map. Over the past 6 years, 82% of all traffic stops in Oak Creek involved minority drivers. But look at the vehicle types. Serena's eyes scanned the data. Lexus, Mercedes, BMW, high-end SUVs. They are targeting minorities driving luxury vehicles. Exactly, Morgan nodded. And it gets worse. Look at the asset forfeiture logs. If the driver had any substantial cash on them, or if the officer claimed to smell narcotics, even if no drugs were ever found, they seized the cash and impounded the vehicles under civil forfeiture laws. Because fighting a civil forfeiture costs more in legal fees than the value of the seized property, most victims just walked away. Oak Creek has been funding its department's bloated budget, buying militarized tactical gear, and paying out massive overtime bonuses using stolen money. A cold, dangerous calm settled over Serena. Quentin Harlan hadn't just profiled her. He had sized her up as a payday. Her silver Volvo XC90 and designer clothes had made her a target for his department's parasitic revenue stream. "Draft the amended complaint," Serena ordered. The temperature in the room seemingly dropped 10 degrees. "We are no longer just filing a Section 1983 claim for a false arrest. We are adding a Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act claim. They aren't a police department. They are an organized crime syndicate operating under color of law." Months later, the swagger had completely evaporated from Quentin Harlan. He sat at a long, polished mahogany table in a sterile, windowless conference room on the 14th floor of the federal courthouse. He was not wearing his sheriff's uniform. His legal counsel had advised against it. Instead, he wore a poorly fitted gray suit that seemed to swallow his previously puffed-out chest. His ruddy complexion had paled into a sickly, chalky hue, and the mirrored aviator sunglasses that once shielded his eyes were nowhere to be seen. He looked exactly like what he was, an aging bully who had finally picked a fight with a heavyweight champion. Beside him sat attorney Nolan Barrett, a high-priced, perpetually sweating defense attorney provided by Oak Creek's rapidly panicking municipal insurance carrier. Across the table sat Marcus Pennington, exuding the predatory, unhurried patience of a trap waiting to be sprung. Beside Marcus sat Dr. Serena Langford. She wore a pristine white blazer over a black silk blouse. She did not take notes. She did not look at her phone. She simply watched Harlan, her dark, unblinking gaze utterly devoid of mercy. Her absolute stillness was a physical weight in the room, radiating an intimidating authority that made Harlan physically squirm in his leather chair. A court reporter sat at the head of the table, her fingers hovering over the stenotype machine, ready to capture the destruction of a corrupt career. "Let the record reflect that we are resuming the deposition of Sheriff Quentin Harlan," Marcus began, his deep, resonant voice smooth as crushed velvet. He adjusted his reading glasses and picked up a thick stack of stapled papers. "Sheriff Harlan, let us revisit your sworn incident report regarding the morning of the arrest. You testified under oath just an hour ago that Dr. Langford was belligerent, highly aggressive, and physically resisted your lawful commands. Is that still your testimony?" Harlan shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting to Barrett, then down to his hands. He absolutely refused to look at Serena. Yes, she was causing a scene. She refused to provide her driver's license. "In fact," Marcus pressed, flipping a page, "in your official use of force addendum, you stated that Dr. Langford lunged toward you and that you felt, quote, in imminent danger of physical harm. You claim this justified the forceful application of restraints. Objection to form, Barrett interjected quickly, wiping his brow. The report speaks for itself. You can answer the question, Mr. Harlan, Marcus said, ignoring the attorney entirely. Did she lunge at you? She made a sudden movement, Harlan deflected, his voice tight and defensive. In my training and experience, uncooperative subjects who make sudden movements can escalate to violence without warning. I acted within departmental protocol to secure a hostile suspect. I see. Marcus set the paper down and leaned back in his chair. Sheriff, you also testified that the Oak Creek precinct server experienced a catastrophic, unrecoverable data corruption, which tragically erased all dashcam and holding cell video from that morning. Harlan's jaw clenched. A brief, arrogant smirk touched the corner of his mouth. He thought this was his shield? Without video, it was his word against the civilians. That is correct. A technical glitch. Unfortunate, but out of my control. Very unfortunate, Marcus agreed softly. He reached into his pristine leather briefcase and placed a small, sleek silver flash drive onto the center of the mahogany table. The metallic clink echoed loudly in the quiet room. Mr. Harlan, are you aware that Deputy Bryce Nolan officially resigned from your department weeks ago? Marcus asked. Harlan's eyes locked onto the flash drive, the blood completely drained from his face. I am aware. Are you also aware? Marcus continued, his voice dropping into a lethal, icy register, that Deputy Nolan is a highly technologically literate young man, and that fearing federal indictment for conspiracy to destroy evidence, he did not simply sit by while you initiated a manual wipe of the precinct server? Are you aware that minutes before your technical glitch, Deputy Nolan copied the raw, unedited telemetry and dashcam files to an encrypted external drive, which he handed over to the FBI and subsequently to my office? Attorney Nolan Barrett shot up out of his chair, his face turning beet red. Objection. This is an outrageous ambush. We were not provided this exhibit in discovery. This is trial by surprise, and I demand we halt this deposition immediately. You were provided a formal federally backed spoliation of evidence notice by my colleague Mr. Cole on the very day of the arrest, Counselor. Marcus snapped back, his voice cracking like a whip. He didn't break eye contact with Harlan. The fact that your client chose to illegally delete the primary file to cover his tracks does not preclude us from introducing a securely backed up copy provided by a federal whistleblower. Sit down, mister. Barrett, or I will call Judge Langford's chambers right now and have you sanctioned for interrupting a federal deposition. Barrett swallowed hard, looking at the terrified face of his client. He slowly sank back into his chair. Marcus pressed a button on a small remote. A massive 65-inch television screen mounted on the conference room wall flickered to life. The high-definition, unedited dashcam video played with crystal-clear audio. It showed the pristine morning street. It showed Serena standing perfectly still, her posture relaxed, balancing a bakery box. It captured her calm, measured voice, flawlessly quoting Section 22,514 of the State Vehicle Code. It clearly showed the 18 feet of distance between her bumper and the hydrant. Then the audio captured Harlan's aggressive, booming voice. I don't need a math lesson. The people in the room watched in suffocating silence as the digital Harlan grabbed Serena, spun her with brutal, unnecessary force, and caused the retirement cake to splatter across the cobblestones. The microphone picked up Serena's sharp intake of breath as the steel cuffs were ratcheted down to the bone. Marcus paused the video on a frame of Harlan violently shoving Serena into the back of the cruiser. "Does that look like a physical threat to you, Sheriff?" Marcus asked into the deafening silence. "Does that look like a woman lunging at you? Or does it look like a gross retaliatory assault by a man whose fragile ego was bruised because a black woman knew the law better than he did?" Harlan couldn't speak. He stared at the frozen image on the screen, watching his entire life burn to the ground in full high-definition resolution. He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and dabbed at the sweat pouring down his neck. "But we aren't stopping at a single false arrest," Marcus said. He signaled to a paralegal standing by the door. The young woman wheeled in a metal cart stacked high with heavy white banker's boxes. Marcus pulled a massive binder from the top box and dropped it onto the table with a heavy thud. "We have the sworn notarized affidavit of 74 other individuals, doctors, real estate agents, software engineers, primarily black and Hispanic professionals driving luxury vehicles, who were subjected to this exact same treatment by you and your deputies," Marcus stated, his tone relentless. "We also have the financial ledgers acquired from the town treasurer, proving you illegally seized over $1.4 million in cash and vehicles over the last 6 years. This isn't policing, Mr. Harlan. This is highway piracy." Marcus leaned across the table, his eyes boring into Harlan's soul. "Sheriff Harlan, you are currently under oath. Have you ever initiated a traffic stop without probable cause solely for the purpose of seizing a citizen's private property under the guise of civil asset forfeiture to fund your department's overtime?" Harlan looked at Barrett, his eyes wide, wild, and pleading. Barrett, recognizing the catastrophic prison-level liability unfolding before him, covered his lapel microphone. He leaned in and whispered furiously into his client's ear for 30 excruciating seconds. Harlan closed his eyes. He took a ragged, shaking breath. He looked back at Marcus, his voice a broken whisper. "On the advice of counsel, I invoke my Fifth Amendment, right against self-incrimination." For the first time in hours, Dr. Serena Langford spoke. Her voice sliced through the heavy, terrified air of the conference room like a polished scalpel. "The Fifth Amendment protects you from criminal self-incrimination in a court of law, Mr. Harlan," Serena stated coldly, leaning forward just an inch. "But we are currently in a civil deposition, and in a civil trial, the jury is legally permitted to draw an adverse inference from your silence." She held his gaze, letting the inescapable reality of the trap close tightly around his throat. By refusing to answer that question, Serena concluded, her tone ringing with absolute finality, "You have just confessed on the record to federal civil racketeering. We are done here." The collapse of Oak Creek's corrupt law enforcement empire was not a quiet, bureaucratic affair. It was absolute, swift, and spectacularly public, tearing through the town's manicured facade like a Category 5 hurricane. The civil trial never even made it to opening statements. Faced with the mountain of incontrovertible evidence, the leaked dashcam video, and the terrifying implications of a federal RICO statute, Oak Creek's municipal insurance carrier went into full damage control. The city council held an emergency closed-door session that reportedly devolved into shouting matches and a hyperventilating Mayor Clayton Reeves. The resulting settlement was a record-breaking $28 million, a number that completely bankrupted the town's liability policy. To cover the remaining millions, the city council was forced to liquidate municipal assets, including selling off the very tactical vehicles and high-end cruisers the department had purchased with stolen civilian money. But Dr. Serena Langford had made it abundantly clear to Marcus Pennington. She was not interested in a mere financial payout. She demanded structural annihilation. As a non-negotiable condition of the settlement, the Oak Creek Sheriff's Department was permanently disbanded. Soon after, a convoy of state police cruisers rolled into the precinct lot. State troopers physically removed the Oak Creek Sheriff's insignia from the concrete building, replacing it with a temporary state precinct banner. Quentin Harlan was forced to sit in his former office, stripped of his sidearm, watching silently as state auditors boxed up his life's work. His department was gone, placed under a strict 5-year federal consent decree. However, the hard karma was reserved personally and uniquely for Quentin Harlan. The civil settlement was merely the opening act of his destruction. The Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, comprised of Serena's former colleagues and protégés, had used the immaculate evidence gathered by the Ellsworth Legal Clinic to quietly build a massive criminal probe. Later, the true bill came due. On a rainy morning, the quiet, affluent suburban street where Harlan lived was shattered by the sound of heavy diesel engines and blaring sirens. A coordinated strike force of FBI agents and federal marshals descended upon Harlan's sprawling 5-bedroom McMansion. There were no polite knocks. A tactical battering ram breached the reinforced oak front door. Agents swarmed the property, their flashlights cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. Quentin Harlan, the man who had built a career on intimidating citizens and demanding absolute compliance, was dragged out onto his front lawn, wearing nothing but a white undershirt and flannel pajama pants. His hands were yanked behind his back. Click, click. The sound of the heavy steel handcuffs ratcheting shut echoed in the damp morning air, a poetic, identical mirror to the sound Serena had heard outside the bakery. Harlan was shoved against the hood of a black federal SUV, gasping for breath as his wealthy neighbors peered out through their plantation blinds, watching the town's former top cop get treated exactly like the criminals he despised. He was indicted on 22 federal charges, including deprivation of rights under color of law, massive evidence tampering, perjury, and multiple counts of wire fraud related to the systemic illegal asset forfeitures. Stripped of his badge, his qualified immunity thoroughly shattered, and his municipal pension seized to pay court-ordered restitution to the dozens of minority drivers he had terrorized, Harlan stood trial. He was no longer a big fish in a small pond. He was a desperate defendant in a federal courtroom. Presiding over the criminal sentencing was none other than federal Judge Warren Langford. Langford looked down from the bench, his expression etched with profound disgust. "Mr. Harlan," the judge's voice boomed through the mahogany-paneled courtroom, "a badge is a sacred trust bestowed by the public. You weaponized it. You operated a criminal enterprise disguised as a police precinct, preying on those you were sworn to protect out of greed and racial animus. And when you were finally challenged by a citizen who knew her rights, Your arrogance blinded you to your own legal peril. Judge Langford struck his gavel. I sentence you to 15 years in a maximum security federal penitentiary without the possibility of early parole. Harlan's legs gave out. 2 federal marshals had to physically hold him up as he wept, dragging him out of the courtroom through the side door. Meanwhile, Deputy Bryce Nolan, the terrified young officer who'd provided the unedited footage, was granted full federal immunity for his whistleblowing. Profoundly disillusioned by the systemic rot he had witnessed, Nolan resigned from law enforcement entirely. Using the remainder of his savings, he enrolled in a master's program for clinical social work, determined to help the communities his former boss had targeted. As for Dr. Serena Langford, she did not keep a single cent of the $28 million settlement money for her personal use. She took her entire portion and endowed the Ellsworth University Civil Rights Litigation Clinic with a permanent bulletproof trust. The clinic was officially rebranded the Langford Justice Initiative. With bottomless funding, the initiative was dedicated entirely to providing free, hyper-aggressive legal representation to victims of police misconduct, false arrest, and illegal civil forfeiture across the country. Later, Serena stood at the heavy oak podium in the Ellsworth Law School amphitheater. The room was packed beyond capacity. Students sat on the carpeted steps and leaned against the back walls, a palpable electrified energy buzzing in the air. They were all eager to learn from the woman who had single-handedly eradicated a corrupt police department over a parking ticket. She adjusted her tailored blazer, ensuring her French cuffs were perfectly aligned. She looked out at the bright, ambitious faces, the next generation of prosecutors, defenders, and judges, and offered a rare, genuine smile. "The law," Serena began, her voice resonating with an unshakable, terrifying power, "is not a shield for the corrupt to hide behind. It is a sword for the righteous. And if you learn how to wield it with absolute precision, there is no fortress of power, no corrupt institution in this world that you cannot bring to its knees. Now open your casebooks. What started as a petty power trip by a corrupt sheriff ended in the absolute dismantling of an entire criminal syndicate operating behind badges. Dr. Serena Langford proved that true power doesn't come from a uniform or a gun. It comes from an unyielding mastery of the law and the courage to refuse to be a victim. Quentin Harlan thought he was preying on an easy target, but instead he arrested the one woman capable of ensuring he would never wear a badge again. If this story of ultimate justice and hard-hitting karma got your blood pumping, hit that like button right now. Share this video to remind everyone that nobody is above the law, and subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories of people fighting back against corruption and winning. Leave a comment down below. What would you have done if you were in Serena's shoes? Let us know.